Oh yeah. Today we're going to talk about filter coffee, when filter coffee goes wrong. Lots of beginner baristas and home baristas at some point experience bad filter coffee that just tastes astringent, lacking all sweetness. It's muddy, it doesn't have any fruitiness to it, it just tastes of dirty water. Most people have success with making filter coffee. They experience this bitterness and muddiness occasionally. Maybe a brew has stalled and that's the reason why. And it's just like this minor occurrence. But for others, this is a frequent, even daily occurrence that they can't get to the bottom of. And today we're going to talk about what causes it, how you can get to the bottom of it and prevent it from happening in the future. Starting off with the first one, I think the most important is the water that you're using. If you're using bad water, it doesn't matter what coffee you're using, it's going to taste bad. If you're using water straight from the tap, it's probably got tons of chlorine in it, other chemicals that are going to impart flavors into your brew. And if you are using water from the tap, there is a good chance that it is ruining your coffee. Water is a very sensitive thing when it comes to coffee, and for most people, it's the last thing that they think of. Water has to be within a certain pH range and have a certain amount of minerals to produce a good tasting cup. And if you're just using any regular old water, especially water from the tap, there's a high likelihood that it's not going to be within that criteria. So fixing your water is one of the best things that you can do to improve the flavor of your coffee. If you can get a hold of a water filter, if you're living in a hard water area, one of the best things you can do is filter your water to remove the chlorine and the nasty chemicals and things that might be imparting bad flavors into your coffee. And that should provide some pretty good water to make coffee with. If you're living in a soft water area where there isn't much in the way of minerals or anything in the water, but you've still got the chemicals in there, the best thing to do is to filter the water and then remineralize it with a magnesium remineralizing cartridge. So you can get those online. They filter the water first, then remineralize it, and that gives you almost perfect water for brewing coffee. Or if you don't want to go through the hassle of buying different kit and stuff and trying to remineralize your water, you can buy some bottled water from the shops. Try and find something that fits within the SCA guideline for water. I'll put the link to the PDF that has all the information about that down in the description, so you can have a look at that. If you want to tell whether the water from your tap is good or bad for coffee, aside from the chemicals and things that might be in it, you can go online and search through your water provider to find out in your local area what the mineral content is, the pH. You can see a full spreadsheet, a full test of the water in your local area coming out of your tap. And based on that, you can decide what to do with your water, how far to filter it and remineralize it. So I highly recommend that you improve your water if you're just using it from the tap or something like that, because the water makes a massive difference to the flavor of your coffee. I mean, it's 97% or something like that of the coffee that you drink. If your water's off, your coffee is without a doubt going to be too. The next one, similar to using bad water, it's using bad coffee. If you're just using some regular old coffee off the store shelf and it's worse, pre-ground, then you can expect nothing more than a bitter and dull brew. If your coffee is bad, no amount of tricks or hacks or anything will improve the flavor of your coffee. And it's really as simple as buy fresh beans, grind it yourself, or if you can't grind it yourself and you need to get it pre-ground for whatever reason, make sure that you use it quickly. You can batch it into small pots, freeze them, and then when you need to use the coffee, you just take it out, thaw it, and then you can use that. But by far the best way to enjoy coffee is buy fresh beans, buy a grinder. You can get a fairly decent one for budget, for cheap. Even those bad blade grinders that do a really bad job at grinding up coffee, I think is much better than using pre-ground coffee, because by the time the coffee has even hit the shelves, it's already lost most of the aromatic compounds and the gas. So always use high quality, fresh coffee if you want the best flavor and if you want a drinkable brew. Now we've covered the basics and the main culprits, so we're going to start moving on to techniques and getting more into the nitty-gritty of what actually causes this problem. If you're using a budget grinder, even something like this one here, the Wilfus of Art, which is a pretty cheap budget grinder, you're going to get a lot of fines. Fines are microscopic particles that are formed when you grind coffee. All grinders form fines, but to varying degrees. Usually cheaper grinders form more fines because they're less uniform, they're less precise. And more expensive grinders, they have higher quality materials, they're manufactured precisely, they're much less likely to produce fines and create a very even grind size. But it's not just the kind of grinder that you have, it's also the kind of coffee that you have that affects how many fines are created when you grind up the coffee. If you're using very dark roasted coffee, maybe you like dark roasts, those coffees, because they're so dry and brittle, they cause much more fines. They don't cut when they're ground. Dark roast coffee tends to fracture like glass. When you break a glass, you get tons of really small particles, whereas compared to medium roasts and lighter roasts, which are much more dense, they don't fracture, they hold their integrity, and so they produce less fines. Now, if you have a budget grinder or you like dark roasted coffee or both, then you're not completely screwed. You can reduce the amount of fines, and there are a couple of ways of doing this. The first is, and the most easiest, is once you've ground your coffee, you run your finger along the edge of the catch cup that you've ground into. If you look into the catch cup, you can see all this dust that surrounds the walls. That's the fines, or at least some of the fines that have made it up onto the walls. There are some in the ground coffee itself, but you can minimize the amount of fines that end up in your V60 or whatever by just running your finger along it and ditching the fines that end up on your finger. The more effective way to do this is to get a Cruve sieve. A Cruve sieve, I'll pop a link down in the description. It's a sieve made for coffee, for separating out coffee grounds, and it does this in layers. So you pour your ground coffee into the top, you put the lid on, and then you give it a shake, and it separates the coffee grinds out by different bands of microns. And what you should find is the fines will go down to the bottom, and your grind size, the grind size that you want for your filter coffee, is all in one area. And if you do one of those things, you can reduce the amount of fines that end up in your coffee. But of course, the best way to reduce the amount of fines and bypass all of that is to buy a better grinder. Branching off the topic of fines, chaff is another thing that causes slight bitterness and a nasty taste in your filter coffee. Chaff is the remnants of the dried skin of the coffee. When it's been processed, there's a little bit of skin chaff that remains on the beans, and they kind of have a bitter hay-like taste. If you have a coffee that has lots of chaff, like a medium or a light roast, then it's definitely going to be imparting those hay-like bitter flavors into your coffee. And so the best thing to do is remove it. Use the Cruve sieve that I mentioned earlier to just shake it, and it will separate all of the grinds from the fines and the chaff. These are marginal gains though, so if you're not brewing your coffee correctly in the first place, you're not really going to notice much of a difference. And that leads us on to the next thing, which is how you are pouring your water, how you are actually brewing your coffee. The way you brew your coffee and pour the water onto the coffee bed massively changes the way that the coffee tastes independent of roast and the type of coffee that you're using. By pouring with very high flow rate at a height, you increase the agitation in the bed, which is great for extraction, but you also increase the speed of fines migration, the movement of fines in the ground coffee down to the bottom of the bed. Similar to if you shake a box of cereal and the big pieces rise to the top, they all migrate up to the top, and the fine particles, all the small bits, move down to the bottom. Same thing is happening here. And the reason why it speeds up is because of the very aggressive jet of water. It creates a lot of downward pressure in the coffee slurry, and that forces fines to move down to the bottom of the bed quicker. But by contrast, if you pour very fast but low to the bed, or you use a spoon or a stick to manually stir up the bed, you're at less risk of fines migration, but you also get the benefit of higher extraction. The slurry is more homogeneous, and the movement of coffee grounds is more side to side and horizontal than it is straight down. So you're at a much lesser risk of causing fines migration early in the brew and stalling the filter. One of the other things that you can do to improve the flavor balance of your filter coffee and reduce the risk of fines clogging up your filter is to perform what's called the Rayo swirl. This was a technique pushed by coffee expert Scott Rayo, and his idea behind this was by swirling the brewer, the V60 in this case, at the end of the final pour, you increase the evenness of the bed. The bed levels out, increasing the evenness of the drawdown. But the other beneficial thing about this final swirl is it displaces the fines onto the sides of the brewer, effectively removing them from the brewing process. And while the fines at this stage in the brew have already been fully extracted, what it just does is it prevents the water from extracting from the fines further and causing bitterness in the cup. So it results in a cleaner cup overall compared to not doing it. And those are the potential causes of your bitter and muddy filter coffee. If you're experiencing this problem at home, you've looked at my video, you've tried different things, and you still can't figure out why your coffee is tasting bad, or you've got another question or something else that you need help with, then I've just started doing one-to-one online video calls. Link to that will be in the video description. If you liked this video and want to support me, you can do so by buying me a coffee. I'll put a link down to that in the description. Subscribe, turn on notifications, give this video a thumbs up, and I will see you soon.